Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's 7:15. We will make a start. Welcome to this first Cabinet meeting of the new administration, which was elected in May of this year. Slightly different approach to what we've had previously. We clearly have the Cabinet members around the table. As usual, I have extended an open invitation to the leaders of the other groups. So Councillor Mrs Beavis as leader of the Independent and Green Party, Councillor Lynn Jeffries as leader of the Labour Group, and Councillor Mrs Pell as leader of the Halstead Residents Association. Also sat just behind my colleagues here are the Deputy Cabinet members. They, together with the leaders of the other groups, are most welcome to participate in the debate. Just raise their hand up and most welcome to come. But for voting purposes, the law says that only, obviously, members of the Cabinet may vote. But I hope that that will enable us to have a good debate. Now, we have quite a lot on the agenda tonight, so I'm going to move on. First of all, to apologies for absence, and I have apologies for absence from Councillor Mrs Beavis of the Independent Green Party, and also from Councillor Mrs Pell, as there is a meeting of Halstead Town Council tonight, which she is the chairman of. Are there any other apologies? I think everyone else is here. Well done. Okay, item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest which anyone wishes to make? Councillor Cunningham.
Chairman, thank you. With a range of issues on the agenda tonight relevant to Essex County Council, I'd like to declare a non-pecuniary interest as a member of Essex County Council, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Miss Bowers-Flint.
Same, Chairman. There are several references to Essex County Council, of which I'm a member of. Thank you.
Councillor Schwer.
The same, please, Chair, with regards to references to Essex County Council.
And if I can make the quartet, as a member of Essex County Council, I make the same declaration of interest. Right, any others? No, we'll move on then. Minutes of the previous meeting. This was a meeting held on the 13th of March. Some of you were present at that meeting. Those of you who were present, are you happy that it is an accurate record of the meeting? Agreed. Thank you very much. I will sign the minutes accordingly. Thank you. Item 4, public question time. I understand we have no registered speakers for tonight, and therefore we will move on to item 5. Now, items 5 and 6, members, you will note that there are on both these items, there is a private paper attached to your papers relating to some of the financial requirements of this. They will not, they're not in the public domain. I think I'm right in saying that no one has indicated that they wish to refer specifically to anything that is in the private paper. And if that is the case, can I just check that that is the case? That you're happy to work on the paper that's in the public? Yeah, thank you. Therefore, in agreeing the recommendations or otherwise on items 5 and 6, we will also be agreeing or otherwise the recommendations on the private papers that are there. Okay? So without more ado, we'll go to item 5 to agree supplemental matters relating to the grant of an easement at 6 to 14 Springwood Drive, Braintree, and the report will be presented by Councillor Kevin Bowers.
Thank you, Chairman. This report before members tonight is regarding council-owned land on the Springwood Drive Industrial Estate in Braintree. This report is following on from the report brought to Cabinet in December 2022. As explained, this seeks for approval to supplementary issues as outlined it relative to the decision of that Cabinet meeting to grant an easement over BDC's land at Springwood Drive, Braintree. To provide Cabinet with a background to this, the Council was approached by a developer relating to the option over the land to the rear of the Council's land at this location. As previously explained, that land has potential subject to planning for development for employment purposes incorporating industrial and warehouse units. However, it was it was explained that to facilitate such a development, the developer requires access to the site across the council's land. Cabinet approved the grant of the easement over Springwood Drive car park in favour of the developer, Charthouse Property Group, on the 6th of December 2022. On the basis of the Cabinet approval, both party solicitors have engaged in the due process of documenting the agreement. During this process, some practical changes have come to light as the developer's plans further evolve. This has resulted in the need to accommodate a number of changes to the terms originally agreed, which are detailed in the report before you tonight. We have three options to consider: do nothing, accept some changes, though not all the changes, or accept the proposed changes as summarised in the report. All four changes are regarded as necessary to bring about the optimum solution to enable a deliverable outcome within the most reasonable period of time. The Council's interests are protected in the event of time lag by the introduction of the payment in the event of an extension beyond the 1st of November 2027. Therefore, I am asking for Cabinet approval for the recommendations in Section 2 as detailed on page 6 of tonight's agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bowers. Any comments or questions from anyone? No, you're happy with the recommendations as set out in 2.1 to 2.4 and the similar recommendations on the private part of the agenda. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Move on to item 6 to agree the leases at 3, 16 and 16A, land north of 16, and 18 Freeborns Road, Witham. Again, the paper will be presented by Councillor Bowers.
Thank you, Chairman. Tonight, this report is seeking approval of Stock Place Limited's application to BDC to surrender the unexpired terms of their ground lease in exchange for a new 125-year leases in respect of industrial properties at Freeborns Road, Witham. Stock Place are embarking on a substantial refurbishment and upgrade of the industrial accommodation on the subject sites, involving significant capital investment as outlined within the confidential appendix. Landlord's consent has been granted under a separate licence to alter. With the existing leases, Stock Place are faced with a diminishing asset commanding between 46 and 74 years unexpired, as outlined in the report. Particularly in the case of the shorter unexpired terms, funding becomes very difficult as lenders take into account the exponential diminishing value in the lease. Even in the case of 74 years, the capital expenditure involved is jeopardised by the prospect of running into the same problem in the coming years. Stock Place have therefore approached the Council with a request to trade in their existing leases in favour of the new 125-year term. Upon receipt of this request, the Council instructed an independent valuation report from Whitebrow Charter Surveyors in respect of each lease. These are each included in the confidential appendix. Following extensive negotiations with the leaseholder, terms have been agreed with Stock Place as detailed in the report. The options before you tonight are either approve the heads of terms or do nothing. By doing nothing, this would mean declining the request to surrender the current ground leases and grant longer-term ground leases. This would be inconsistent with the Council's asset management plan, which states the opportunities to extend industrial ground leases shall be explored, and also with the Council's employment and business promotion policies. The advice letter from Whitebrow explains the rationale behind the balance between ground rent and capital premium. The resultant capital value of the new ground rents will add substantially to the value of the Council's portfolio and will enable the leasee to invest for the longer term. For those reasons, this is the recommended option before us tonight. Therefore, I'm looking for Cabinet support to approve the recommendation as set out in 2.1 of tonight's agenda on page 14. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bowers. Any comments or questions on this item? No? And I draw your attention to the fact that there is a confidential appendix to this report as well. In that case, are you happy to accept the recommendation in 2.1 on page 15 of the agenda? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. We now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 7, options for the future of the garden waste collection service. This is on pages 29 to 41, and the report will be presented by Councillor Tom Cunningham.
Thank you, Chairman. In line with the budget provision allocated for 2023-24, agreed at full council in February's budget setting meeting, Cabinet brings forward an option paper regarding the authority's provision of non-statutory garden waste service. over a period of some months, the administration has had to consider how it approaches its financial management and its MTFS position. Compared with others, a relatively manageable position and a challenge not at the level that many other authorities are facing. However, unprecedented inflation has put an additional strain on the finances, and this has exacerbated the need for difficult decision-making. The operating cost for the free garden waste service currently stands at £683,000 per year for a service that is not used by all residents of the district. The Cabinet Member for Resources and Performance, Councillor Bowers, will be expanding on the financials further shortly. However, this situation is not sustainable if we wish to tackle the MTFS challenges. And Chairman, we're trying to take these decisions against the background of uncertainty over government proposals around waste collection, and we awaited further information locally, including the impact of County Council decisions, before bringing this paper to Cabinet. There are three options tonight. One, maintain the status quo, appreciating the service doesn't operate every month of the year. Two, offering an opt-in service, servicing that those who wish to use it for all 12 months of the year. Or three, the most brutal and dramatic of all, cease the service totally. Some authorities do not collect garden waste at all, including one in Essex. Mr. Chairman, can I say at no stage of our MTFS discussions and our conversations about the difficulties with our financial position did we ever consider this as a viable option for this district. We appreciate that this service is a service appreciated by many. But we also acknowledge that in Essex, 8 councils already charge for garden waste. 1 council plans to charge in the new year. 1 has withdrawn the service totally. 1 has chosen not to charge for the service, and 2 are unable to charge as they collect food and garden waste combined, but will need to charge if this service is compelled to split the collections. Across the country, 232 authorities, over 70%, charge for this service. The report clearly sets out the thinking behind the modelling of an opt-in service, and I pay tribute to the officers under the excellent leadership of Paul Partridge for outlining this and for their work and producing this report and any likely alternative arrangements. I have absolute confidence, having only been in this post since the end of May, in the validity and the operational practicalities and the implications outlined. And can I take this opportunity to thank all officers under Paul's leadership involved in this detailed work. Chairman, I have been a member of this Cabinet since May 2015 and a Deputy Cabinet member for a few months before that. The proposal to charge for this service to protect the highest quality of frontline and statutory services was first mooted and Cabinet discussed informally as early as October 2015. The decision then was to keep a free cost of garden waste service, and every subsequent year since. The need to protect statutory services following the most unprecedented years in living memory means we have a difficult decision to make this evening. Chairman, the recommendation is that Cabinet approves the introduction of a subscription-based garden waste collection service, option 2, outlined in this report, agrees an annual subscription charge of £55 for this service, based on the financial models showed at paragraph 7 in this report, with a 50% discount for any additional bins requested by customers. C, it agrees an early bird discount of 50% on the subscription fee in year 1 for sign-up by 30th of November 2023 to incentivise take-up and help with forward planning of resources. D, it agrees an initial subscription period of 13 months from the 4th of March 2024 to the 28th of March 2025, and thereafter a period of 12 months renewable on the 1st of April each year. E, it approves expenditure against the £200,000 agreed by Council on the 30th of February 2023 to cover the set-up costs of the new service in 2023-2024. F, It offers a garden waste collection service using only biodegradable sacks sold by the council at a cost of £8 per roll of 20, i.e. 40p per sack including collection, to households who are not on wheel bin collections. And finally, item G, delegates authority to the Cabinet Member for Transformation, the Environment and Customer Services in consultation with the Corporate Director Operational to agree the terms and conditions to be applied to the new service. Thank you, Chairman. I so move.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Bowers, I think you're seconding this.
Yes, Chairman.
To
Yeah.
tribute.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. As Cabinet Member with responsibility for finance, I feel it's only right that I remind and assist members with details of our latest financial position. This shouldn't be a surprise to members who have been here before the election, since this council prides itself not just on our record from a financial point of view, though because of the transparency we afford our members during budget processes and beyond. That said, I'm appreciative that we have a number of new members across the authority, so it's worth outlining our current financial position, which is obviously key to any decision made tonight. Our current financial position, as referenced during the budget process for 23-24, is probably the most challenging this authority has ever experienced, and that is definitely the case since I've been a member of this authority. We currently have a budget gap of £2 million estimated over the life of the medium-term financial strategy, the MTFS, impacted by inflation, Brexit, the pandemic and the war in Ukraine, to name just a number of reasons for this. And I think it is fair to say that these reasons for our budget gap are situations many outside of our control as a local authority. We would be in a much worse position if it wasn't for our previous record of many years of financial stability. This said, there are many uncertainties going forward into 24-25 and beyond. Following on from the overall estimated budget gap, and as detailed in our regular MTFS updates, which new members will start to experience, we currently have a gap of £644,000 in this coming financial year, which cannot be continued to be addressed via balances. I think I speak for us all that in our ideal circumstances, looking at the possibility of needing to charge for garden waste collection isn't something that we would want to be considering, albeit that from the majority of authorities now do so, especially during the current cost of living crisis we find ourselves in. However, the budget gap we have, and one that could quite easily get larger as we move forward, this isn't something that we cannot be considering for all the reasons that I'm sure will be discussed during this debate. One thing we cannot do is put frontline services at risk, and I'm sure we are all in full agreement with that. To bring what we are discussing home to members and provide the stark reality we find ourselves in, I can set out a number of services and or funding that we currently provide, which are discretionary and not statutory, which is the same case as with garden waste collection. These are as follows, and then these numbers are ballpark figures taken from the previous budget setting. So discretionary service spending, community support and development and community wellbeing, £228,000. External funding, citizens' advice and community 360, £124,000. Health development, £60,000. Economic development and business engagement, £231,000. Sustainability and carbon management, £109,000. Planning enforcement team, £327,000. Now, this is not an exhaustive list, though just some of the bigger items we would need to be looking at subject to the decision tonight. Please be aware that should we decide not to go ahead with the proposal before us tonight, with the level of income and savings which it costs the authority to currently provide the service, then we would need to be looking at not just one but a number of these services or funding to cease to be provided by this council. That's the potential of this decision. This is the reality, and I just feel members need to be aware of this ahead of making the decision before us tonight. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bowers. Councillor Shreer.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we've had good financial reasons, but also economic reasons as well, and the opt-ins of the council waste collection for green waste from Councillor Cunningham and Bowers. But I'd just like to highlight the environmental benefits as well, because they are really important as an option for our residents, so that they can actually increase and look at, perhaps even undertaking, if they currently do not, the use of home composting, which is really important, because rather than it being sent away and treated and potentially being brought back, in order to encourage a more circular economy, which meets our council's climate change objectives, they can do this at home and have a direct benefit into the garden. So overall, I think this is, in the long term, a really good policy decision that is going to be made by Cabinet tonight, which I support because it does actually meet our climate change objectives as well of this council.
Thank you, Councillor Swear. Councillor Lynn Jeffries.
Thank you. So I seem to be the only person here to be able to give an alternative or a reply, if you like. So while, of course, I understand the need for savings, I can't help feel that tonight's proposal does fly in the face of the Council's own corporate objectives of sustainable environment and a great place to live, work and play, and the climate change emergency declaration from July 2019, when the target was to be carbon neutral as a council as far as practicable by 2030, as well as supporting our communities to reduce the impact of climate change across Bantry District. It must be difficult for the Cabinet members to justify this proposal at the same time as encouraging people to recycle their food waste, reducing the amount of food waste going to landfill, together with the fact that later in this evening under agenda item 13 we've got a report on the cost of living crisis and agenda item 15 on litter management. In the middle of a cost of living crisis, people are worried about their bills, their household bills, inflation, and everybody's having to look at their spending. The timing of this proposal is particularly unfortunate, and it is disappointing that the government has been unable to make the decision on this matter, but not a surprise, as they have not shown leadership on environmental issues, and it leaves it to the district councils to take the lead on the climate emergency. Since this item came to Cabinet last time in March, of course, there have been district council elections, one of the biggest community engagements exercises we have. We found that on the doorstep, the proposed charge was among the top 3 issues raised on the doorstep, the other 2 being potholes and doctor surgery appointments, that of course we don't have any responsibility for. We even found that people without gardens had concerns for the environmental impact, and a lot of people said they would just put their garden waste in the grey bins, and some might use the recycling depots, but others thought it would increase fly tipping. Of course, there isn't the detail in the report because you've said it's going to be delegated powers. I'm interested to know how we're going to know that the person at number 1 has paid but number 3 hasn't, but I'm sure that will all come out later. And I'm also interested that for the paid for service, we're not going to have a break during the winter, but again, that'll probably come out later. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. As you say, you've been left holding the baby on this one, the baptism of fire. But I think you put your points very strongly. I think it would be fair to say that if Councillor Mrs Beavis was here, she would also be opposing this from my reading of the Civil Hedingham Parish Council minutes. But anyway, any other comments, etc.? Councillor Mrs Barsley, I'll come back to Councillor Cunningham to round off. Yes.
Chairman, 2 questions. The first, I'm assuming this is going to be done by a barcode being put on the green bin. I see that the second bins are going to be charged for, but at a lower rate, which is good. But I am well aware of somebody who has 3 green bins and only pays for 1. And if they only put that 1 bin out, the other 2 wouldn't get the barcode put on them. So I'm assuming they then wouldn't get emptied because they haven't got a barcode on it. But if it happens in a little village where I live, I'm sure it happens in other places. And the other thing, that I would like to ask is this 644,000 gap that we have, is that just a one-off gap, or is that for every ensuing year that we would have that gap? Thank you.
We'll deal with those two questions before I ask anyone else to come in. And I've got Councillor Cole. Councillor Barnes, do you want to pick up about the gap? And is it just for 1 year or is it subsequent years?
No, that gap would be for subsequent years. I think I was sort of alluded to in what my comments earlier, is we can cover it with balances, but we can't continue covering it with balances. Otherwise, you just can't continue with that. And also, when you're looking at reserves and financial resilience of the authority, you just can't continue like that. So yes, it would be ongoing, and that's why I believe we are looking at this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coleridge, and then Councillor Taylor, and then Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Chair. My observation is there's a lot of talk about fly tipping and whether that would increase, but even if the proposals are taken up, there's still many options our residents have got to recycle their garden waste. They can take up the subscription model. They can compost, as Councillor Schweer observed earlier, and there's also the free option of going to your local recycling centre to dispose of your garden waste. And I think if someone loads their car up to fly tip, they might as well do the extra mile and go to the recycling centre. So I don't really agree with the observation that it's going to increase fly tipping. And we didn't have a huge amount of fly tipping before the garden waste was collected. So, I'm not really bought on that point.
Thank you very much. Councillor Taylor.
I'm personally disappointed that we've found ourselves in this position, but it's a decision that's got to be taken out of necessity and financial reality. I think it's interesting that looking at the £644,000, a number of residents in the election said to me, if we use a £25 dividend, as it were, if that was used, could that cover the costs of this? And clearly that wouldn't, because there would be subsequent years. So I thought that was an interesting point to cover off. The other point I was raising, what do we do with spare bins if residents choose not to subscribe and they have a bin? Do they keep it or do they hand it back to the council? That was just more of a practical question. If we weren't looking to charge residents for this service, the £644,000, if you were to cover that through council tax, what would the percentage increase in council tax be to cover that £644,000? Is it like a 10, 15, 20% increase in council tax? I just thought that was an interesting question to ask if that's been modelled. Councillor House.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was very keen listening to some of the figures that Councillor Bowles was mentioning as part of the other non-statutory services that could be considered with regards to trying to fill the deficit gap of that £644,000 if we chose not to do it. I'm just going to pick out the highest figure one, which was the £327,000 for planning enforcement. Maybe not a question for Councillor Bowles, maybe one more for Councillor Spray, but if we were to forego planning enforcement, what would the effect be on the district if we were to use that money to fill the funding gap?
Thank you. Councillor Spray wants to come straight in, I think. Yes, Councillor Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. I think that probably members who were around over the last couple of years as councillors might remember a member reference group investigation into planning enforcement. It was extremely successful, and actually for me it was one of the most satisfying things that I've undertaken as a district councillor. The recommendations from that group, together with, shall I say, a persuasive presentation from me, resulted in council approving funding of over £200,000 injection of money into the planning enforcement team. And the result of that has been a huge improvement in staff morale, because they've been able to increase the team members, and an improvement in their working practices. It really has produced a good result.
if this council is unable to close the funding gap by not charging for green waste collection, one of the results could be it's quite possible that funding for the planning enforcement team would go, because it came as a surprise to many that planning enforcement is not a statutory service. We don't have to do it. And there are planning authorities in this country that do not have planning enforcement teams at all. Now, and you know, I'm honestly, I'm not being over dramatic or alarmist when I say this. It is entirely possible that that funding could go if we find ourselves in a position of not being able to close this budget gap. Now, I, for one, do not want to see my inbox filling up with complaints from residents, parish councils or members that we are not taking enforcement action, whether it's because a neighbour has maybe or maybe not built an extension which they didn't have permission for, or whether it's a developer of over 500 homes not following planning conditions, and anything in between. It would do nothing to enhance the reputation of our planning team and nothing to enhance the reputation of this council overall. And I do think it's really important to bear in mind that this is one of those non-statutory services which we could lose. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Strain. Councillor Boris, did you have the answer to the question raised by Councillor Taylor?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, the answer to your question, Councillor Taylor, is hypothetically, it could be around about 9%. The reason I say hypothetically is because we have referendum principles that we can't go up above a certain level, which is about less than sort of 30% of that sort of figure. So that would be the number, but we just wouldn't be able to do it.
No, that's precisely my point, is that it would be impossible to do it without a referendum, which means that where would you find the money? That was my point.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions, Councillor Shreer?
Thank you, Chair. If I could just come back very quickly on the comments made by Councillor Coleridge and Taylor. With regards to fly tipping, there is a lot of evidence that does not support an increase in fly tipping for those councils that charge for green waste. I think that's an important point, because it has been a concern of a lot of other councils, but that has not been the case at all. And from Councillor Taylor with regards to bins, you've only got to phone, the residents have only got to phone into operations, and they'll either be collected by operations if you don't want an extra bin, or alternative uses, hopefully more composting by the resident.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mrs Cunningham.
Thank you, Chairman. Looking at the list of districts already charging, I think we should commend the authority for the good financial management that has enabled this service to be provided free of charge for so many years. And I appreciate it's been a very difficult decision, bearing in mind the points made by both Councillor Bowers and Councillor Cunningham. And as portfolio holder for Stronger Communities, the community support and wellbeing budget protects residents right across the district, particularly those with vulnerabilities, be it by age, by geographical location, social pressures, financial challenges. These residents rely on the support that ultimately comes from our community budget. A wide range of ages and groups benefit hugely from the community support, so there isn't really an option to cut this budget. And I think if we think of the areas that would be affected by a cut in the community budget, that's community transport, community grants, arts heritage, supporting the voluntary sector, community safety, supporting investment in sports, and I know the authority has supported investment in a lot of pitches recently, and a variety of community facilities. So I would strongly oppose looking at anything that takes money out of the community budget. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Cunningham. Any other comments or questions at all? Councillor Ritchie?
Thank you, Chairman. If you just indulge me for a few moments more, I've listened very carefully to what some of our members have said this evening. This proposition takes us out of the minority and into the majority of those authorities who are now charging for green waste. And there's never a good time to introduce a charge for a non-statutory service. But I shuddered at the mention of this being part of an increase of the council tax, which would be wholly unfair on people who don't use a green bin. So this is the absolutely fairest way to introduce a charge for those who want to use a service that we can provide as a council on a charge-by-charge basis. And for that reason, I will be supporting this evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tom Cunningham, is there anything you want to add in winding up?
Thank you. I mean, I'll just respond to a couple of other points and some very thoughtful contributions this evening, which I think we're all hugely appreciative of. Appreciating that this is not a decision we'd like to make in a perfect world this evening. This is a difficult decision, and it's not one that's been taken lightly. I totally appreciate the points made by Councillor Jeffreys regarding climate change strategy. We did declare a climate change strategy, I think, in the autumn of 2019. 6 months later, of course, the world did change in an unprecedented way. Yet, during that period, we have formulated an action plan and are delivering against that action plan. The last administration did some really excellent work under Councillor Mrs Schmidt and her colleagues, and Councillor Schweer and I in this new administration are looking at that climate change strategy, particularly the deliverables and the action plan, and we'll look to see how we can continue to build on that work going forward. And there are many elements to that climate change strategy: tree planting, or our approach to organisational efficiency in terms of how we can be more energy efficient and sustainable as an organisation. Other slightly bolder interventions in terms of economic development, supporting green growth initiatives, capital funding to go towards supporting the iConstruct project, which supported goods and services in the construction industry, promoting modern methods of construction around largely the premise of sustainability. I would just say that other councils who perhaps have been very vocal about their green credentials have been charging for green waste collection for some time. I remember the Green Party's flagship council, Brighton, which, if you pardon the unfortunate nautical pun, really rather sunk in May this year, I understand, had been charging for quite some time. So I think the point about climate change is well made, but I think it's also, Chairman, timely that perhaps through Cabinet we look to update the new administration on our work on the climate change strategy and the action plan, and discuss with you offline perhaps bringing a paper to Cabinet certainly well before the end of this calendar year. In terms of some of the operational points that Councillor Mrs Bowers made, yes, there will be obviously a system using technology of monitoring which bins to collect, which bins to empty. And if Cabinet is minded to agree this decision, then obviously the final stages of that operational planning can commence, and we can advise all member colleagues, so they can advise their residents, and that will be supported by a comprehensive communication package, some more of the operational detail and how that will impact on them when and if this service is implemented. I appreciate the other views about non-statutory services that would have to be considered for the Acts. Very treasured non-statutory services that are appreciated by thousands of residents. Without wishing to repeat anything else, Mr Chairman, I'll bring that to a close, but very grateful for the contributions this evening. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. So you have before you the recommendations, which are in paragraph 2.1a to G. I think we'll be quite open on this. Can I ask if you are in favour, this must only be Cabinet members, of course, those in favour to raise their hands, please. Those against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you very much indeed. And can I thank officers for the huge amount of work that has gone into this over quite a number of months, and of course quite a bit of work now to start as we move towards implementation. Thank you for that. We'll move on then to item 8, to agree the process for allocating Rural England Prosperity Funding, which is on pages 42 to 47 of your agenda and will be presented by Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll very briefly just run through the context of the report. So early in the year, we were awarded over £500,000, £589,000 to be exact, of Rural England Prosperity Funding to spend within the rural areas. There is two schemes to which this grant funding can be applied to. One is for small and medium-sized rural businesses who are looking to kind of innovate and bring in new IT technology to their premises as part of their expansion, although they will need to match fund at least 20% of a grant between £10,000 and £50,000. And Scheme 2, which is for parish councils or legally constituted community groups to invest in their local natural or heritage assets, or to come up with things like repair workshops or mend workshops. The only difference with this scheme is that they wouldn't need to or have the requirement to match fund anything, and again, grants of between £10,000 and £50,000 will be available for them to bid for. I think that's all I'll mention on that one. So the recommendation is to approve the decision-making process for the capital grant funding for the ROPF scheme, as set out in the report, and to delegate to the Cabinet Member for Economic Growth and Inward Investment in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Stronger Communities to approve the criteria against which the application will be determined. I so move. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on this item? Councillor Cunningham.
No, thank you. Thank you. Just welcome the recommendations this evening. I know there's been a lot of work engaging with the communities, the rural business community, rural communities, for their involvement in formulating a process that's easy to understand and, most importantly, means swift decision making and the money actually getting to the organisations, the businesses, the communities that needs it. And I think that's to be applauded. So an excellent paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Councillor Van Dalkum.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just add, as representing a quite rural, very rural area, that we and the residents there welcome very much this this opportunity to have some investment in the area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Anything else you wish to add, Councillor Richard? No? In which case you have, colleagues, the recommendations before you in paragraph 2, 2.1 to 2.3. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Move then on to item 9, the Potential Open Space Improvements Report 2023, and this will be presented by Councillor Gabrielle Spray.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Members, I'm pleased to present the 2023 edition of the Potential Open Spaces Improvements, to be known as POSI, formerly known as the Open Spaces Action Plan. This document provides a table of outline proposals for the provision of open spaces within the district, either to enhance existing open spaces or to provide new ones. And I would very much like to thank officers for the work they've done on this and producing a very fine document. It demonstrates where those open spaces are most needed, and it enables the Council to secure financial contributions from developers. These contributions are sought under the Open Spaces Supplementary Planning Document, which was adopted in 2009. And this gives guidance to developers on the Council's approach to seeking planning obligations on open space provision arising from new developments. The Council must back up the supplementary planning document with evidence to demonstrate where a contribution must be spent, and this is the purpose of the POSI. The table lists the open space proposals by wards and then parish, and gives an outline of works to facilities that already exist or proposed works to provide new facilities. There is no ranking of the proposals, as the likelihood of any schemes being implemented depends on the availability of finance, and because these improvements are reliant on grants and Section 106 receipts, which can be sought from nearby developments, there are also no timescales given for completion of schemes. In order to update the POSI, a consultation took place between 3rd of November 2022 and 27th of January this year. We received responses from 44 town and parish councils, and these were considered by officers, and if suitable, amendments and updates were added to the 2023 document. Sometimes proposals are rejected, because they don't meet the criteria. Reasons can be, for example, where the ownership of the proposed site is unclear, or where the space or proposed activity would not be available to be used by the public. So, for example, within a school's grounds, and we do occasionally get suggested projects for use, on school premises, but obviously that cannot be accessed by the public, so it doesn't meet the criteria. The recommendations set out in this report will help the Council to deliver the corporate objective relating to a sustainable environment and a great place to live, work and play. The recommendation is set out in point 2.1 of the report, page 48, and is to approve the potential open spaces improvements 2023 as set out in Appendix 1. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Spray, any comments or questions at all from anyone? No, you're happy then to accept the recommendations as before you? Agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. Move on then to item 10, Homes for Ukraine Support Fund, and this report to be presented by Councillor Mrs Bowers-Flint.
Thank you, Chairman. The report I bring before members tonight is to note that Braintree District Council can claim UK-wide funding for 2023-24 able to be spent within the Council's delegated framework. As mentioned in the report, the Homes for Ukraine Local Authority tariff grant has been allocated to local authorities and devolved governments to provide wraparound support to individuals and families to rebuild their lives and fully integrate into communities, including assisting Ukrainian guests move into their own homes and reduce the risk of homelessness. The information regarding this is fully detailed in the report with the relevant options to be considered. Option 1 is to decide to provide resettlement support to assist with the rehousing of households at risk of homelessness that are resident under the Homes for Ukraine scheme. The cost of providing this support is to be claimed from Essex County Council from the Homes for Ukraine tariff grant. The level of support will be managed in such a way that commitments made by the Council will not exceed the funding available. Option 2 would be to do nothing, which would mean that the money allocated by Essex County Council will not be fully utilised, and if not spent elsewhere, will have to be repaid to the government. This isn't the place we want to be in, as it will also mean that the Council may have to provide homelessness assistance, including nightly lets, or access to social housing through Gateway to Home Choice. Therefore, the recommended option before you tonight is option 1 for the number of reasons detailed in the report, with Braintree District Council using this fund to spend on the Homes for Ukraine resettlement support. I therefore ask Cabinet to support this recommendation before you tonight in section 2 on page 126 of the report. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ms Bowers-Flint. Any comments at all on this? No, I think it would be fair to say I think Essex and the people of Essex have been extraordinarily generous in the way in which they've helped the situation with Ukrainian refugees, and I think it's something which the county can be very proud of. Okay, if there are no comments, could I ask if you are in agreement with the recommendations as shown in paragraph 2 on page 126 of your report? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the appointments to outside bodies, etc., which is in my name. You have before you the details. There are 3 appendices which I draw your attention to. First, appointments to cabinet subcommittees and working groups. These are committees which are not Widdicombeised as such, well, not Widdicombeised at all, and therefore the membership is entirely down and could be kept entirely within the cabinet. But it's been our way in which we've operated here to very much include members of all groups. So, for example, on the local plan subcommittee, there will be, and I'm delighted that the other parties have made nominations, 2 members from the Labour Party, a member from the HRA, and 2 members from the Independent Green Party. On developing democracy, again, something which we want all sides to do. All three opposition leaders are included on that, and also the chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And it's remiss of me not to have mentioned that Councillor Heath, as the new chairman, is with us tonight, and we're very grateful that you're here, and you'll be most welcome at future meetings as well. But we'll sit on the Developing Democracy Group, and then there are other committees there which have the Member Development Group, again with members of all parties. The two that don't are the Investment and Development Programme Board and the Capital Programme Board, which work as part of the Cabinet and are deliberately split into two with different membership on each, so we provide internal challenge on the investment programmes, etc. Appendix B gives the terms of reference of the Local Plan Committee. I know we've got our local plan through, but we all look forward, don't we, to going through again on the local plan. And maybe this time we'll go for 7 garden communities. No, maybe not. Just 6. Right, okay. And then finally, in Appendix C, appointments to outside bodies, generally put there, for example, on the local highways panel, my reasoning thinking there is that the Independent Green Party do have a member on that through their county councillor, but there was no Labour representation, and so that has been offered, and I'm delighted that that's been taken up there. The Braintree District and Eastleigh Community Fund, welcome Councillor Lynn Jeffries onto that with Councillor Bowers-Flint and Councillor Mary Cunningham. And I think the others stand as they are, except where there is a local area, the local appointments are made to include people who represent that area. I'm just hesitating slightly because I noticed on the Superfast Essex Steering Board we have councillors GS and JC, and I'm looking to Kim Mayo to see whether she can expand on those 4 initials. And if she can't, I won't embarrass her anymore.
I think that's Councillor Spray and Councillor Coleridge.
Coleridge?
Yes.
Right, okay, so, yes, on that, if we could put GS to expand to Councillor Gabrielle Spray and JC to Councillor James Coleridge, fine. So those are the nominations before you. Happy to accept those? Sorry, I beg your pardon, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just very briefly, could we also replace Councillors Wrench and Cunningham on the Braintree Village Consultative Group to reflect myself and my colleague, Councillor Kevin Bowers, please?
Sorry, which one is this?
The Braintree Village Consultative.
Third one down.
Third one down, right, hang on. Right, so we have at the moment Councillors Wrench and Cunningham, and that is to go to Councillor Mary Cunningham and Councillor...
Myself and Councillor Bowers.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Bowers and Councillor Ritchie
in
place of Councillor Wrench and Councillor Cunningham. Agreed? Okay, fine. Happy then with that amendment, that we accept that recommendation? Okay, thank you. Move on to the next item on the agenda then, which will be item 12, the joint neighbourhood area application for Finchingfield and Weathersfield. And this will be presented by Councillor Mrs. Gabrielle Spray.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Braintree District Council received this application for a joint neighbourhood plan area from Finchingfield Parish Council and Weathersfield Parish Council on the 6th of April this year. Due to the pre-election period, the consultation on the application was delayed until after the 4th of May elections. Neighbourhood plan area applications which cover a single parish area and are required to be accepted by the local authority are not normally reported in this way, but because this is a multi-parish application, public consultation was required and a decision by Cabinet is sought. Comments were invited by both statutory consultees and those who live, work and carry on business in the area, and this consultation took place between the 10th of May and the 30th of June. Notices were also displayed in the villages, were placed in the Braintree and Whittam Times and on the Council's website. A number of responses have been received and they are detailed in the agenda report. I'm pleased to say that they were supportive of the proposed neighbourhood plan with no objections made. Officers have considered the proposal and the consultation responses and declare that the legislative requirements are met and provide an appropriate basis for the neighbourhood plan to proceed. Therefore, the options are to approve the neighbourhood plan area application for Finchingfield and Wethersfield as submitted. The application covers the whole administrative extent of the parishes and as such is justified, or to not approve the area application and as no issues have been raised which would justify such a refusal, the recommendation on page 140 is that in accordance with Regulation 7 of the Neighbourhood Planning Regulations, Braintree District Council designates the administrative parishes of Finchingfield and Wethersfield Parish Council as a neighbourhood plan area. And that means, Chairman, that they can now begin work on their joint neighbourhood plan. And I do wish them well with this because we know from the neighbourhood plans that are already in place and are ongoing, it involves a tremendous amount of work by usually a fairly small, dedicated group of people. It is hard work. The outcome is really welcome and a entirely good thing to do. So that is the recommendation, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spray. Are there any comments or questions at all from members? No, I think two parishes coming together to work on it is very sensible, particularly in that area where they are so close together. If there are no comments, then the recommendation is in paragraph 2 on page 140. Are you happy to accept that recommendation? Agreed. Thank you. That then takes us on to the next item on the agenda, which is report on the cost of living. Excuse me, just bringing the agenda down. Right, item 13, cost of living update. Members will recall that back in late summer, early autumn of 2022, we had a joint scrutiny took place to look at the work being undertaken by the council to address the cost of living, and that committee was chaired by our now chairman, Councillor Diana Garrod. That reported to full council on the 10th of October 2022 and contained some 22 recommendations. We undertook, as the then administration, to respond as quickly as we could to that report. And indeed, we reported back to the Council in January of this year, 2023, on our response to the various recommendations. This now is I'm very keen, as the leader of the administration here, to make sure that this continues and there is regular updates so that this doesn't become a report which everyone nodded and then nothing went further forward. And in this report, I think we're beginning to see some of the work which is already going on, the start of actually what will be needed to tackle this issue. So you'll see from the report the creation of a Braintree District Cost of Living Partnership, including representatives from the public, the voluntary, community and business sectors working together. The Council, of course, did provide from the New Homes Bonus 1.6 million universal financial support to all households which had a liability to council tax through a New Homes dividend of up to £25 per household, which clearly was a much greater percentage to those on the lower levels of the housing ladder in terms of the way in which they're separated for council tax than on the higher. I think at Council A, it was the equivalent, Band A, it was the equivalent of some 17% reduction in the district council's tax. But that clearly was a one-off from the New Homes Bonus, which of course is a reserve which Councillor Bowers will remind me we can only use once, and once it's used, that is the case. We also agreed, however, to an investment of £1 million in the 23-24 New Homes Bonus, spread over a 2-year programme to tackle issues caused by the cost of living crisis. And I'm delighted that discussions are going on, particularly with the voluntary sector. We're in no way are we trying to replace the voluntary sector. but to actually give them the resources where their skills and expertise can make best use of that. And I was delighted to sign off only last week some just under 100,000 to the Braintree Area Food Bank, particularly to assess and help the needs of those who live in rural areas. It's all very well having food banks in the centre of our towns, but if you're living in a rural area with little or no public transport, then that is not the most helpful way. And so I'm delighted that we are looking at that as well. And you will see in paragraph 5 some future work which is done there. Again, particularly making it easier for everyone to reach the help and support, including those living in our most rural areas, and to help the most vulnerable by supporting community groups and organisations to do more. So this is by way of an update, and I hope perhaps about once a quarter we will bring further updates to Cabinet so we can see how that moves forward. I've invited Councillor Garrett to the table tonight because, as I say, her committee and in particular the work that she did in bringing that together really has got us to the point that we are today. And I don't know whether there's anything you wish to add, Councillor Garrett. Assuming that Councillor Mrs Jeffries will share her microphone with you.
Right, sorry about that. I would just like to thank you for the update. I'm very, very pleased with the work that has kicked all of this off and continued, and particularly with the partnership. And I'm particularly pleased about the £100,000 that you've considered, in particular for the rural areas, because we were seeing there that the cost of living is in fact biting those people quite hard at the moment, and continues to do so. So thank you very much, Councillor Butland, for that update.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions anyone has? No? Can I then that we note the update and the future plans, and also ask for a further update to come in maybe 3 or 4 months' time as to how we're doing on that. Okay, thank you very much indeed. We'll move on to item 14, the fourth quarter and annual performance management report, Councillor for 22-23, Councillor Bowers, and this is on pages 173 to 205 of your agenda.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This report sets out the Council's progress towards our corporate priorities as at the end of the fourth quarter and as at the end of the 2022-23 financial year. The key achievements in the fourth quarter and at the end of the year. The 5-year healthy housing strategy was approved by Cabinet. This sets out the key priorities and measures on how the Council will work with partners to address housing needs. 40% of pledges to reduce waste under the Love Essex Love Food Pledge come from residents from the Braintree district. This is the highest response across the whole of Essex. The Fear in Neighbourhood Plan was adopted, which brings the total number of plans now adopted to 7. The Man vs Fat football scheme to tackle obesity has seen 4 teams sign up, with 90% of participants losing weight, which totalled over 390 kilograms in the year. The Council hosted a successful jobs fair at the Plaza, with 22 businesses taking part, attracting over 150 visitors. The new Economic Growth Strategy 2023 to 2028 and associated action plan were agreed at Cabinet. This sets out the core vision and key priorities, as well as how the strategy will be funded. Our support and employment officer engaged with 274 people throughout the year, helping 239 people across training and support, and has seen 20 individuals gain employment. 53 affordable homes were delivered in the fourth quarter of the year, bringing the total for the year to 288. In the year, the Housing Service also prevented 238 cases of homelessness through various interventions. 54 people accessed our handyman scheme in the fourth quarter, bringing the total to 211 in the year. Throughout the year, the Customer Service Centre resolved 69% of the calls they dealt with at first point of contact. To put this into context, they received just over 100,000 calls in the year, and by dealing with the queries and helping customers in the contact centre, over 69,000 calls did not have to be transferred through to services to deal with. Throughout the year, a total of 571 businesses contacted us for business support, and we saw 991 new business start-ups across the district. There is also an additional section included in the report under the Enhancing Our Environment section, providing an update on the progress of numerous actions by theme within our climate change strategy. A more comprehensive report on achievements throughout 2022-23 is also being presented to Cabinet. I think Councillor Cunningham was alluding to that earlier on this evening. As at the end of March 2023, we have 54 projects are complete, 8 are on track and progressing well. We have 2 projects with an amber status. They are facilitating the delivery of purpose-built medical centre in Sybil Hedingham. This continues to be amber due to the ongoing delays with the land transfer that I've been keeping members updated regarding. And the project to refurbish the wet and dry changing rooms at Housestead Leisure Centre due to cost exceeding budget. The project to deliver the Witham Enterprise Centre, or Witham Enterprise Units, has a red status due to issues with planning design, and a fundamental review to establish the viability of the project is required. Throughout the year, 2 projects have been cancelled, both due to the projects no longer being financially viable. 10 performance indicators have achieved or exceeded target. 1 performance indicator has missed target by just less than 5%, and 2 performance indicators have missed their target by more than 5%. Financial performance. The finance section of the report provides the provisional outturn spending on day-to-day service provision compared to the budget of the year. Also included is the summary of Treasury management activities, movements on the general fund balance, and a summary of spending on capital projects. The financial position for the year is as follows: a positive variance of 728,000 after allowing for service carry-forwards. The provisional outturn is being reviewed to ensure ongoing vacancies have either been reflected in the 2023-24 budget or are taken into account when preparing for the 2024-25 budget and updating of the medium-term financial strategy. The net change in the general fund allocated balance because of the budget variance is an increase of 268,000. Earmarked reserves identified as no longer required and a planned repayment of a prior year pension fund contribution also added to the level of unallocated balances. Spend on capital projects for the year totaled 8.7 million, with the majority of the spend incurred on the completion of the Manor Street development and the Horizon 120 Enterprise Centre, the Plaza. Despite yet another challenging year to the cost of living crisis, budget pressures and increasing demands for services, the Council has continued to perform well, and I hope members will agree. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bowers. Open for any comments anyone has. Councillor Mrs. Lynette Bowers-Flint.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not quite sure who is responsible for cemeteries at Cabinet level now, and they may not be able to answer this evening. I'm quite happy to have a written response, but I notice on page 183 that a project at Braintree Cemetery has been closed due to unviable costs of the scheme, but also it did propose to increase burial space there. As I've previously been involved in many years gone by on this cemetery, can I be assured how many years we've got left in that cemetery, please? Thank you.
And as soon as I find out who has cemeteries in there, I will find the answer for you. I'm sure it's tucked away in someone, but we won't have a quiz now to know who's... Oh! No.
I was just going to say, I'm not the Cabinet member responsible, I don't believe, and I don't have a direct answer for that, but it was just to confirm that is not connected to burials and the capacity is still available, but I don't know the number of years we've got, so we will need to get you the full response once we find out who the Cabinet member is. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, okay. Are you happy with that? Well, you have to be, because we don't know who it is at the moment. So as soon as we... Councillor Jeffries, yes.
I used to be. Lynette and I, Councillor Bowers-Flint and I have often discussed cemeteries, I remember, and it is quite an ongoing problem at Braintree, and it did get resolved for a while, so hopefully some work can be done there in the future. But I can't answer the question of who is now.
No, okay, we will actually... You sort of have these little challenges, and it just shows this isn't stage managed in any way, these Cabinet meetings. Yes.
Chairman, if I can just come back, there is a serious note to this, and the reason is, and Councillor Jeffries will just back me up on this, there is a serious problem in Braintree Cemetery because of the clay soil there and flooding, and my induction on this council was to chair a cemeteries meeting where somebody had gone, unfortunately, to be buried, and it was full of water and they couldn't get the coffin in. And obviously there was a lot of upset at that time. So whilst I appreciate that it's not viable cost-wise, especially in this day and age, we still need, or I would still like to be assured that we don't, we're not experiencing that problem with the clay soil and the flooding so much, although I have seen flooding in there, and we have got enough space, because that's another thing that would be embarrassing if we did run out of space in the cemetery. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. We're not belittling it, and we will get an answer to that. Any other points anyone wishes to raise? Councillor Schreer, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I'd just like to comment on the volume of projects that have gone through on this performance report that have been extremely good by being kept on track. I think it's worthy of note, and to thank the officers on this, because I know this is the last quarter, but over the year, when I was formerly on the scrutiny committee, it's always it's great to see that the results of what we're trying to deliver are actually being really delivered as well and on time, and that these projects stay current and that they are delivered through all the various sections that are here. So I just wanted to highlight that, because I think taking into account the cost of living crisis and everything else that we're going through, it's really worthy of the quality of our officers and the quality of our leadership at Braintree District Council taking those decisions that have resulted in, quite honestly, really good investments and frontline services to our residents.
Thank you for that comment, and I'd just like really to add a little bit, those of us who were at the LGA conference last week, making the point to government ministers that actually local government performed throughout the whole of the crisis, that the pandemic and all that followed, and that local government is a can-do organisation. And whilst we appreciate that one or two councils of differing political persuasions have not been good ambassadors for local government, the vast majority of local authorities have done a superb job, and that's down to the dedicated work which staff have done. And I think those of us who've been connected with this district council for many years recognise that actually service runs through the centre of all our staff in all our operations and other areas. And I very much welcome the comments that you've made, Councillor Schreer. Any other comments at all? No? Are you happy then to note the performance of the fourth quarter? Agreed. Thank you very much. That takes us on to the item 15, the Cabinet's response to the scrutiny review into litter management across the district, and this will be presented by Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not going to say too much on this this evening, because colleagues will remember that this report was presented by the Scrutiny Committee before the local elections, and it was noted by the Cabinet member, and I know she won't mind me saying this, with a slight indulgence from the Chair, a very comprehensive response was given in terms by former Councillor Mrs Schmidt in terms of Braintree District Council's excellent record on these matters over a number of years, of which she was an outstanding champion and set the bar extremely high in terms of standards, and we continue to thank her and applaud her for that. But seriously, I think what was an excellent report conducted by the the Partnership Development Group in the last council. We were extremely fortunate, I think, in the last council, despite the fact that the majority of the council time was spent looking at a computer screen through COVID, conducting our business. The quality of the scrutiny reports that came through was absolutely superb, and that was a particularly excellent report. I think in responding to it, the two key themes that came out of it were education, whether it's educating businesses, communities, or our younger generation in terms of litter prevention, but also partnership working, how we can enhance partnership working in dealing with litter collection. And I think a great onus was focused on what more can be done with Highways England, National Highways now as they're known, other local authorities, particularly collaborative work along our major arterial roads. A lot of that work is happening, and it will continue to be a focus of our work, our conversations, particularly around shared services, how we can continue to provide a quality service, not just us as authority, but working with other partners, because we appreciate the importance of this to all our residents, keeping a clean and tidy district. So that will be very much a focus of the administration and our approach to operations in the years ahead, not just because it's the right thing to do, Mr Chairman, but I'm sure both you and I fear the wrath of Wendy if we didn't continue to operate to those high standards. Thank you very much indeed, but an excellent report.
I think she's coming back later in the year for some medical treatment. Let's just make sure it's all clear and clean when she comes back, please. Right, any other comments or questions from anyone? No? In which case, are you happy to accept the recommendation to approve the responses of Cabinet set out in section 3? Agreed? Thank you. That then takes us on to the Cabinet response to the scrutiny review into markets and associated events. And this will be presented by Councillor Frankie Ritchie.
Thank you, Chairman. Perhaps the report is just to approve the responses of Cabinet as set out in section 3 of the report before you this evening. Again, just want to pay tribute to the quality of the report that was sent to us on the 13th of March as a Cabinet. 10 really good recommendations, worthwhile recommendations, and equally 10 really good responses to each of those recommendations set out before you this evening. I won't go into too much detail, but I would just like to pick out a couple with you, if that's okay with you. Response number 5, with regards to transport from Braintree Town Centre into Braintree Village. There are ongoing consultations and engagement with Landsec on a sustainable and a suitable option of travel from Braintree Town to Braintree Village, and they are ongoing, and I'm sure that we will reach a suitable agreement in due course. I am working extremely hard with officers to bring that to a conclusion. And response number 9, around a council running, or the council running a consultation to find out what's important to customers that use the market. It's fair to say that I think customers' needs are ever changing and shopping needs change, and there is a transition between what people want to do when they visit a market. We are keeping very close to the changing needs and desires of the consumer. But we also want to highlight that carrying out a consultation can be quite costly if we haven't got the right parameters in place. But we will keep an open dialogue with market traders, and if those ever change, then we will think about dedicating some officer time and some budget, if applicable, into carrying out that consultation. Other than that, recommend the report to Cabinet. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Any comments at all? Councillor Ms Jeffries.
I was just going to ask about. I was actually going to ask about the bus as well, but you pretty much answered that. But on the recommendation 8, on the young traders market, I wondered if you'd had any response about perhaps having that in Braintree.
I hadn't directly. What I will do is I'll pick that up with my next discussion with council officers and see if that's something that we can investigate further. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from anyone? No? In which case, are you happy to accept the recommendation in terms of the responses from Cabinet to the report? Agreed. Thank you very much. Item 17, we do not need to exclude the public and press because we've already covered that. Item 18, I have no urgent business, and therefore I will declare this meeting closed at 20:33. Can I thank you for your attendance and your contribution?